On His Blindness by John Milton. Now we are very familiar with this poet, John Milton, quite famous for most of his works. He was born in 1608 in London. Coming from a middle-class family, he went to the Christ College, Cambridge. After he left the university, he studied independently for a career as a poet. In the English Civil War, he worked under Oliver Cromwell, creating pamphlets against or for religious freedom, divorce, press freedom, etc., which was not common those days, or which was not there at all those days. It was in 1651-52 that he lost his eyesight completely. Later, Milton was arrested in 1660 after Charles II came to throne, and the rest of his life he lived secluded in the back skirts of London. At that point, he was working on his epic poem, Paradise Lost, which is considered as the classic of English literature. Now, this poem that we are about to go through, On His Blindness, serves as his legacy and is considered as among the greatest poems ever written in the history of English literature. And you can see autobiographical elements in the poem. It can refer to the author's own blindness. Looking at the poem, what you can see here is the first stanza of the poem. When I consider how my light is spent, half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent. Now the first line itself, he talks about his light and how it has been wasted because of his blindness. But this is also deeply religious, because the poet can also mean light to be the inner light or the spiritual capacity. So it can mean how the inner light is slowly fading off towards the last part of the poet's life or the narrator's life. The poet assumes that his life is not yet half over. That is why you can see in the phrase, in this dark world and wide. It is one of the most typical ways Milton handles adjectives. He puts one in front of the noun and one behind it. So you have dark and you have wide. Two adjectives, and you have the world, the noun world in between. The third line refers to a biblical parable of talents. Matthew chapter 25 verses 14 to 30. It speaks about a bad servant who neglects his master's talent. A talent was a kind of a coin. Instead of using it, he saved it, kept it idle with him. Now this talent may also mean a literal talent. In other words, Milton's talent as a writer. In line 4, Milton says that, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent. This means that his talent as a poet is useless at that point because he was slowly losing his sight. Though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker. This can be understood as, although my soul is even more inclined to serve God with that talent, even though I want to serve God with my talent of writing, it becomes frustrating because I cannot use it because I'm losing my eyesight, because we know that for someone who has an eyesight for so many years, when it suddenly goes off, it's difficult for such a person to write. So he feels that his entire talent, which can be used to serve God, serve humanity, will be wasted if he becomes completely blind. He wishes ultimately to present his true account, or give a good account of himself and his service to God. To serve therewith my Maker, and present my true account, lest he returning chide, doth God exact day labour, light denied, I fondly ask, but patience to prevent. So he asks God, or Milton expresses the speaker's desire to serve God through his poetry, to use his talents to glorify God. Now, this line may also refer to the second coming of Christ, or the judgment day. Lest he can mean Christ or God, returning chide can mean that he won't chide or rebuke me, or I hope that I've used my talent till now. Before I become blind, I've used my talent to the maximum, and I hope that when Christ comes to the earth the second time, he would not put me away, he would take me with him. In line number 7, Milton asks God, in a very irritating manner, complaining manner, if God just wants day work, or lesser task, since Milton's blindness denies him light, he asks God, what do you want from me exactly? You have taken away my eyesight, but you still want me to write. And he asks God, how will he use his talents, the God-given talents, if God himself makes him blind? Now, we can note here that Milton allows his grumbling tone to show first, and then he qualifies his own attitude as foolish. That is why in the 8th line he says that I fondly ask, but patience, I should have the patience to wait and see exactly what God's plan is for me. So it's an inner dialogue. This stanza is an inner dialogue where Milton talks to himself. And he says that patience is needed in life. That murmur soon replies, and then he gets the reply from God. He feels that after he questions God in line number 7, in the next 2 lines, God tells him, God doth not need either man's work or his gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. Mild yoke means people who are more obedient to God's will. These people are the ones who serve God best. This image of the yoke can be seen in the Bible. It is biblical. And yoke is actually a kind of, it is a harness put on the ox as the ox plows the field. So he gets the reply back from God that God does not need. He understands that God does not need man's work or man's gift. People who serve, or people who do their daily work to their best, are the people who serves God the best. So he feels that in order, if he feels that without making much complaints, without making much noise, simply serving God till the maximum you can is the best way to serve God. Is kingly, thousands at his bidding speed, and post over land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. His state is kingly. explains God's greatness. Patience goes on to elaborate the next line. At God's will, thousands of people, and it can also mean thousands of angels, messengers, they can go all over the world. Now, the line implies a sort of constant worldwide motion of service to God's commands. The last line also talks about the great restfulness and peace. So, there is more than one way to serve God. The entire poem, Milton tells the reader that it's not the only way to serve God is not through noise. There are different silent ways of serving God. And patience is telling the poet that even his waiting or the apparent inaction caused by his blindness can be a kind of service if he bear the yoke well, if he does his work well to his best. So Milton understands that even if you have disabilities, even if you're sick, even if you cannot do things as you did in the past, still you can serve God by the best that you can do with the talents that you have right now. So Milton tells the reader that instead of complaining that about the things that we do not have in life, the best way to serve God is to um, serve God by standing and waiting, not simply sitting idle, but by doing your work the best, to bear the yoke well. The last line is often quoted and it's most famous. They also serve who only stand and wait.